Good evening, everyone. We're coming to a Thunderhill track event soon. And ahead of that event, what I'd like to do is give everyone a review of a few select corners, looking at high performance aspects that will be interesting. So it's not going to be a comprehensive coverage of the track. In October, we put together a track review video that covered the entire track in a fair amount of detail. It talked a little bit about some of the advanced techniques, but not really extensively. So, but that's a good foundation for the rest of what we're going to do tonight. I would recommend going back and reviewing that video. So here's the track we're talking about, Thunderhill East, the traditional 3-mile configuration. That's what our track map looks like. The red circles indicate the corner worker stations that are typically in use. Verify that on your first lap on the way out. That may change a little bit. We are using the bypass as we normally do for this event. So let's talk a little bit about cornering. You may have seen some version of this diagram dozens of times. If you've ever given a talk on how to do a track, you've probably drawn your own version. This is a nice generic corner. It's a really good starting point. You know, you get onto the brake, you ease off the brake, you turn in, you do a late apex, yada, yada, yada. Then we confront the reality of racetracks. This is Buttonwillow rather than Thunderhill, but it illustrates the issue. Do any of these corners match this generic diagram? Not really. And it gets worse as you start to look at lots of different tracks. There are just so many different types of corners that generic corner diagram looks less and less useful. But as you look at track maps, you may notice there are some corners that look similar to each other. And perhaps you can put them in a bucket, in a category. And then you may find some other corners that have some similarities. And yet again, another set of corners. So as we go back to our generic diagram, perhaps it's not going to cover all these different cases very well, but perhaps we could look at having a starting point for technique for different categories of corners. I use the term corner taxonomy. I like to take corners and put them into groups. It's an imperfect process. No system is going to be perfect in getting all the corners that match well, but it's a good starting point. So let's take a look at a set of corners that are very similar. These are at a variety of racetracks. Some of these are bidirectional, so this represents about 13 different corners. They are each special in their own way, but they have a lot in common. And we're going to seek to understand the commonalities and then talk about the differences. The differences I'll call corner modifiers. So as we look at the size, shape, and width of a corner, that's going to change how we approach the corner. Even if it's similar to some other corner. The surface, right? There are different levels of grip at different surfaces. Laguna Seca has traditionally been low grip asphalt. That may change. Some curbs are very friendly. Some curbs will eat your wheels. So there's a lot of variations to look at there. Elevation, crests, brows, which aren't quite a crest, it's a change in slope, dip, and then up and down slopes. In the track talk I did in October, I spent a lot of time talking about these kind of elevation changes. At the event itself, about half of the offs seemed to occur in situations where there was a downhill braking zone. So there are drivers that did not consider the fact that downhill is a little different. The car's not going to brake as well. So as advanced drivers, you really want to tune in to all these different variations. And sort of the cousin of elevation changes is going to be camber changes. different corners have baking or they're off camber or crowns. There are camber changes where maybe a corner's flat going in, it's got nice banking going out, or other types of changes. The car itself is going to factor into it. Some cars will have a lot more power than grip. Some will be the other way around. Your tire type is going to factor in as well. The weight balance of the car, drive wheels. There are some cars that go enormously faster in corners because of aero. So all of these things factor in. A few people may have a little bit, splitters and wings, which will have a major influence. Other than that, cars with similar tires, a lot of cars will be mid-corner, similar kinds of speed, given similar talent. Okay, so as we adapt to corner specifics, what are we going to be looking at? For example, you may want to use a later apex when the track falls away. You don't want to be doing a lot of turning still at the exit. If the track falls away, the camber goes away, or there's decreasing radius. You get a lot of that turning done early, which gives you a later apex. Front wheel drive cars tend to favor later apexes a little bit. Early apex. If there's camber that appears, or there's a slope in there's a hill that'll catch the car, like turn 6 at Laguna Seca is way faster than it has any right to be if you just look at a map, but you've got that hill that just catches the car. Momentum cars may get away with an earlier apex because you're not going to be trying to put down 700 horsepower on your way out of the corner. So there are a number of factors to consider as well. Again, early throttle. If there's a crest, a little bit of early throttle can help keep the back of the car planted as you go over the crest. Again, the entry into turn 6 at Laguna is a really good example. The bypass at Thunderhill, you want to be on throttle coming over that so the back end stays happy. Also, anytime you want a touch of understeer, throttle is helpful. Let's take a look again at this group of corners. 2 corners at Thunderhill fit into this diagram. First, let's look at turn 8 at Thunderhill and turn 9 at Thunderhill. If you're familiar with the track at all, it may be puzzling why I put these 2 corners in the same category. And they are remarkably similar. If we refer back to this diagram, they all fit in this rough category. Now, the corner modifiers play a huge factor in how we handle these corners. And we'll get into that more as we go into detail on these corners. So I call these momentum corners. So if you've ever done any data analysis, if you put on your data analysis hat and think about what is the single most important performance metric in this corner, what are you going to be looking for in the data to know that you're improving in this corner? So let me go through the examples. Late braking. So if you brake later, you got to brake harder. Now you're upsetting the balance of the car. Is this something you want to do as you approach a 100-mile-per-hour corner? Maybe not. How quickly do you get to full throttle? Well, that may be a measure of how much you overslowed the corner, right? If I go way too slow in a corner, I can mash the throttle very quickly. So maybe that's not the best indicator as well. High V-min. Typically, these corners, you're exiting at a very high speed. At high speeds, cars don't accelerate as well. So having more momentum, having a higher V-min is good for almost every car. Because if you overslow the car, it is very hard to make that up with the throttle in a fast corner like these corners that we're talking about. Peak lateral G-force. We'll look into that a little bit in more detail and talk about how you need to be careful about that. Spoiler alert, it's a fat peak, not so much a tall peak. If you can get fat and tall, that's great. But let's work on getting a fat peak first. Okay, let's let's take a look at some data. These are two different cars going through turn 9. The first thing, well, actually, is two different drivers in the exact same car in the same session. They pulled into the pits and did a driver switch. One is an instructor, the other is a student driving a car. And the instructor's not maxing out the car. You know, it's somebody else's car. So they're driving somewhat moderately. So the first thing we notice is there's a substantial speed difference. That's a little over 10 miles per hour speed difference. The next thing we can look at is the lateral G's in that corner. As we look at the lateral G's, what we see is they have both drivers reach approximately 1 G laterally. But the green driver, who's going faster, over 10 miles per hour faster, has a very fat peak in lateral G's, much, much fatter peak. Now that translates to a bigger radius, and we'll be able to see it. We'll look at a GPS map of the traces. But there's a channel that you can create within a data system that calculates the radius of a corner. And you can see the lower down here is a smaller radius. So the purple car, which is going slower, has a tighter radius. That's where they're getting that peak in lateral G's. And in fact, they could pull 1.1 G's and would still be going slower because they don't have this fat peak. You can see the green car, the radius is bigger. It's up higher here. It's bigger, and it stays turning for a longer period of time. So that's what you may have heard the phrase slow hands in fast corners. This is what this looks like, right? We're pulling high G's for a longer period of time. We're moving our hands slowly so we have a bigger radius, and we're turning for a longer period of time because we're turning our hands more slowly. So you can see here in numbers, I'm not pushing the car any harder, right? I'm going, probably 12 miles per hour faster. That's a big difference in a high-speed corner. It's very hard to make up that difference just with throttle. Now, if we look at the GPS trace, so this is, again, is turn 8 at Thunderhill. We're coming in from the right, going left bottom. Our faster car is the green trace. Just from this, you can see it's got a bigger radius. It's a smoother curve. The red curve, the magenta curve, it's got that sharper bend in the middle in the exit, right? It's more conservative in the exit. It's not using the full width of the track, and it's straightened out much earlier. So let's see what that looks like as we look. This is a heat map where we're now color coding based on lateral G. So blue, the deeper blue is higher lateral G. And you can see our faster car is loading up the suspension earlier and is staying loaded up longer. So it's got this more gentle curve at high G for a long period of time. That's what we want. We want slow hands and carry a high G for a long period of time. Let's not do anything sudden in these kind of corners. We're jumping ahead to turn 9. Again, here we've got the magenta car is the slower car. The green trace, it represents the faster car. Again, looking at lateral G's, we have lateral G's loaded up for a much longer period of time with the faster car. And right about here is where the crest is in turn 9. There's a big uphill, and then there's a crest. And you can see that the slower car gives up lateral G's very early on and is straightening out and is not taking advantage of the crest. Here they are very early on, very low lateral G's. The trace is almost straight. The other car is carrying lateral G's, pretty heavy lateral G's, almost up to the top of the crest. In this case, the green driver is going significantly faster and is pulling higher G's. And the reason they're able to pull higher G's is because they have faith in that uphill. And many drivers don't trust that. Again, if we look at radius, we see the magenta driver, the radius gets small, going down is small, gets a small radius very quickly. That is what happens when we're aiming for a very late apex. You turn, you go deep, you turn sharp. And the green driver is willing to do an earlier apex, which means they're not turning so sharp in the beginning. They're angling into the corner, and they're out here at this line. That's right about where the crest is. Right. And you see the green driver still has significant lateral G's at that point. They've carried a lot of lateral G's up the hill, and they know at the crest, the lateral G's got to be lower, but you know, they're at about 0.8 and dropping quickly there as the road falls away. Whereas the magenta driver gave up very early in the process, did not trust that that slope was going to catch the car, and went for a very late apex. So another big part of making this work is early apex. You know, we talk about early apex, early exit. Let's take a look at what the line looks like. Here's kind of an aerial view as we come through 9, through the apex curbing to the exit. It's hard to see the hill there, but the crest is happening right around the early part of the early to mid part of the exit curbing there. So there's a lot of turning that you can be doing between that apex curbing and the exit curbing. But in order to make that work, you've got to use the full width of the track. Many drivers do not. And, you know, maybe it's okay for drivers who are new to the track, new to driving, to be very conservative because it's blind. You can't see it. And you can see from this picture that there's not a lot of grass out there beyond the exit curb. A lot of people have spent some time out there mowing the grass. So I can understand the being conservative, but as you get to know the corner and get to know your car, you want to use the track. If you're not using that track, you're pinching the car off, and that you'll pay for that all the way down to turn 10. So you want to fully exit turn 9 and move the car over to the left like that. A lot of people hurry that up. They don't exit, they mid-track it and don't really use the full available track. And we can take a look at what that looks like. These views are not from the car that gave us the data. These are from a couple different cars. Here's a car that's kind of mid-tracking it, a little bit right of center. There's room for a whole nother car to the right, at least one other car to the right. That's the shiny bit to the side there. That's the exit curbing. There's a ton of room there. Here's another car. You can see they're probably have 2 tires on that exit curbing. You can barely see it because they're using that full track. Maybe not on your outlap, but you got to work up to that. If you're an advanced driver, you want to use the track. It's there for you. And turn 9 will start to feel more like turn 8 in terms of being a fast momentum corner if you take advantage of the hill and use that to get some turning done, and you use the full width available to you. Otherwise, it feels like a very slow, tight corner, and it's not. It's not at all. Okay, so let's talk about another thing. Let's see if we can see this. So here are two different brake pressure profiles, where 10 represents, threshold brake. I'm braking as hard as I can. You see the orange one, I've really compressed the braking, and the blue one, I'm getting a lot of braking done, but not at such a high peak. And that means I get into the brake earlier. I have a long, slow release. So there are times when each of these is appropriate, right? And it depends on the corner. With this kind of corner, which one do we want to do? So I don't have good data for Thunderhill. I don't have good comparison data for Thunderhill for this particular type of corner, but here's the bus stop at Buttonwillow. It's in that same category. It's a little bit weird because it has the high curbing in the middle and so on, but it's a momentum corner. As much momentum as you have coming in, you want to carry as much of that as you can safely through the corner. I have these heat maps showing GPS traces of two different cars. In this case, I'm mapping the brake switch. So these two different cars, they're on the brakes at a similar time. The bottom trace, the car is getting into the brakes a little bit earlier. The release is at a similar time. But that's just kind of a binary signal. Let's look at something a little bit more analog and see what's going on between these two different cars. So blue is heavy braking and cyan is moderate braking. And you can see the top trace, heavy braking, very close to turn in. The cyan, the lower trace never gets into very heavy braking. And the braking is spread out over a much longer period of time. The other thing the lower trace is doing, you may be able to tell the radius is bigger. The turn in starts sooner, and he turns more and looks like he's biting off more of that curbing in the middle, much bigger radius. If you look at the rest of the data for this, you'll see that the lower trace, that car is going faster, less peak braking G's, less peak cornering G's, but significantly faster in the corner, a whole lot faster than the corner. This driver has mastered balance, right? So no extreme braking, no extreme steering input, and is working the car less in terms of max G forces, yet is going significantly faster. This is what we want to look for. Be like the bottom driver. So what's our best way to achieve a high minimum speed? Don't porpoise the car with the pedals, and don't jerk the car with the steering wheel. Those, if you want to boil it down, those are two key things to think about. One of the tricks that I like to do is approach a corner like this a little bit slow. Give a straightaway speed ahead of time and focus on my entry speed, my mid-corner speed. And then later on, I can go back and sort of compress the braking zone a little bit. And if I compress the braking zone too much, I know, because suddenly the corner gets harder and I'm slower. It's one of those corners where I focus on the mid corner first and go back and fix the braking later. So if we go into a little bit more detail, focus on balance, do an early speed adjustment, especially when you're learning the corner, learning or relearning it, or trying to bring a higher level of performance. You want early gentle throttle. One of the things this does is it compensates for the drag due to tire scrub. At 100 miles per hour, you turn the steering wheel a little bit, there's an amazing amount of speed that gets lost due to tire scrub. So getting back to a little bit of throttle means you avoid slowing down. Slowing down in the corner means that the car's you're going to mess up the weight balance of the car. So you're compensating for that. It also helps avoid high speed oversteer. you know, a little bit of gentle early throttle keeps the back end planted. One of the things you really don't want to do is take throttle away. If you feel like you're feeding it too much, just hold it, hold the throttle, right? Don't jump off and jump back on. Now you're porpoising the car. You're getting rid of the balance that we're trying to focus on. And slow hands, of course. That means initiating turning earlier, turning the wheel slower, and unwinding slower and turning deeper into the corner. A great example is turn 9. So many people are ready to straighten that wheel out and get rid of the turning. That means they had to turn faster and sharper, and they had to go slower. And they gave up speed, and they'll pay for it all the way to turn 10. What you want to achieve is a high VMAN, high minimum. If you're looking at data, that's what you want to look at. It's that high VMAN. A proxy for that is looking at the exit speed. In slow corners, sometimes just looking at the exit speed is very deceptive because you could throw away all kinds of time on your way into the corner and, you know, somehow make it up by using the loud pedal. You make up the speed, but not the time. With faster corners, the exit speed is a better proxy, but ideally you want to look at the mid-corner speed. And of course, your eyes need to be way ahead. This corner, say turn 8, you'll see people going anywhere between 70 and 110 at a driving school. Those speeds are fast. You got to get your eyes way, way out in front of you, especially as you start to go faster. So there's another category I want to talk about, carousel. Here are a few examples. 2 of these are actually called carousel, the corner at Sears Point on the left and the corner at Road America on the right. And our target is right there in the middle, turn 2 at Thunderhill. So here's another view of this corner. And this graphic is straight from the track talk I did in October. This is a nice, safe school line. Is that what we're going to teach in advanced track talk? Maybe not. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. So here we come in, we're doing a big left turn here. We get all of our braking done in a straight line. We get to a neutral throttle. We find a late apex and we accelerate out. So the red represents our braking and that yellowish green, that's our neutral throttle, something like that. So here's an alternate line. You can see I'm coming in straight, but I angle into the corner. And the red, again, is my braking. I start braking later, and I'm still braking in a straight line, but I made my own straight line. I'm not braking straight parallel with the edge of the track. I got a straight line going into the track. And that allows me to start braking later and finish braking later. Now, the orange is trail braking. Most people aren't going to be trail braking that deep. It's an exaggeration just to kind of illustrate the point. And if I put these side by side, you can see here I've shifted the braking zone deeper into the corner. I'm able to stay full throttle longer. I'm able to slow down into the corner. With the school line, I get into the corner and I can't really do much. You know, if I speed up too much, I push, and so I'm just putting around at relatively constant speed. If I can't be speeding up, maybe I should be slowing down. And that's what this alternate line represents. I'm slowing down into the corner. So let's take a look at some data here. Again, we're looking at the top traces are speed. And my orange car is carrying speed about 150 feet deeper. So that's 1.5 brake markers. And deeper into the corner. And we can see down here in the braking as well, the green car gets to the brakes much more quickly. The orange car gets into the brakes later. I do like the brake release the green car does. I like that extended brake release that you can see the slope of the speed. I like that. I like that better. The orange car is not bad, but I'd like to take the best of both of those. So what does that look like when we look at a GPS view? Here again, the orange car is angling into the corner, right? Whereas the green car is doing more of the school line. So now if we look at longitudinal Gs, high high braking is that dark blue. You can see the green car finishes braking much earlier, right? And the orange car carries that braking much deeper into the corner. So it forms that driver forms his own straight and brakes deeper into the corner. So that all that 150 feet or so carrying higher speed into the corner. So if we look at a carousel, depending on the car, your style of driving, how your tires are feeling at the moment, there may be different lines. A Miata may take a, just sort of hug the inside. Another car may kind of go deeper. There's a variety of different lines that you may take, and you need to find what works best. And data is a great way to do this because you can do A/B testing. You can try it 3 times one way, figure out, how well that works, and then switch to another way. And all that entry stuff, you can't look at the exit curve and know how well you did, right? You need to look at the data to see your elapsed time and your speed and so on through that entry phase. To summarize this, we talk about slow in, fast out. This is the advanced stock. Drive it in fast, collect it in the middle, and drive it out fast. So this requires a lot of confidence in the car and your tires and yourself, because if you drive it in fast, you could drive off the track fast. So you really have to work up to this. Moving your braking point 1.5 markers, you may not want to do that in one fell swoop. Break it into smaller pieces. So this advice is a quotation from Ross Bentley. This was how he described how to take the carousel at Road America, but I believe it applies to a variety of corners that have similar characteristics. So let's talk a little bit about the dangers of trail braking. So this requires some trail braking. We're probably, most of us, familiar with getting some oversteer from trail braking, or, its cousin, trailing throttle oversteer. You get weight on the front tires, the back end gets light. It's ready to move around and come around. There is another danger of trail braking: understeer. A corner like this, if you come in hot and you're heavy on the brakes as you're turning, yes, you've got weight on the front that's going to help the tires turn, but if you're demanding a lot of braking traction from the tires for braking, they're not going to give you much traction for turning. And very often this happens with people staring off at what they don't want to hit, and you just hang on to the brake too long. What you need to do is get your eyes moved around to where you want to go and ease off of that brake pedal. As you ease off, the weight's still on the front, right? But now the tires have more traction available for turning. It's not all being eaten up by braking. Again, that's something to watch out. If you carry more speed and deeper in the corner, you can get yourself into an understeer situation very easily. Another section I want to talk about is something I call a rhythm section of a track. A really good example of this is the S's in Buttonwillow going clockwise. And here's data traces from a couple different cars. We're looking at longitudinal acceleration, and one driver is going pretty much constant speed through that whole thing. And the other driver, the blue represents braking and the red represents acceleration. You see that driver modulating the throttle and the brake, speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down. The thing this does, it does two things. By accelerating, you're going faster in those parts that are straighter and allow you to accelerate. By getting onto the brakes, you're transferring weight to the front. And if you do it just right, this allows you to turn better, right? And the transfer of weight from acceleration, the weight's in the back, to you get out of the throttle or you get onto the brakes a little bit, it's a more dramatic movement of weight to the front tires. So you get a lot of bite and you get better turn in. So it helps with both. So this is an example where moderation in all things is bad. So we have an example of this at Thunderhill, 3 and 4. So the line is roughly something about like this. what I see a lot of people do, it's very frequent. I see a lot of people come through here at steady speed, and then they accelerate once they feel like they got a clear shot coming out of the corner. What I prefer to do is accelerate as I approach the turn 4 turn in. And then I do a weight transfer right before turn in. I time that so I get weight on the front. It's available on the front as I turn in. And depending on the speed in the car and the traction and so on, that could be a little bit of release off of the throttle, could be a brush of the brakes, could be more brakes. It depends on the car. But that allows you to do a much better turn in so you can get back to throttle and you can go through turn 4 faster. The other key thing in turn 4 is you got to use that exit curbing. A lot of people are like, well, I don't need to use the exit curbing. Well, then that means you're slow. So accelerate and the car will be carried out to the exit curbing. Those two things go together. So yeah, you got to get back over to the other side for the bypass, but you want to use that full available track. Okay, so that is a quick tour of a few corners of the track and applying some car control theory, driving technique to those corners. Like I said, I didn't cover all the corners. If you refer back to the talk from October, there's a lot of detail about, you know, this corner has a little bit of uphill, it's got a little camber, it's got this and that. The concepts that we've applied here, talking about these corners, you can go back and look at those corners and go, wait a minute, I think I can as I come out of the bypass and go to 6, can I use the lessons from turn 3, 4? What do I want to do about turn 1? What's going on with that corner? That's an exercise left to the reader. And I encourage all of you to study track maps, to study track videos before you get to the track and sort of have a plan for what you want to try.